Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Susan Hudson with another episode of Fertility Docs Uncensored. I am here with my amazing, delightful, sweethearted co-host, Dr. Carrie Bedient from the Fertility Center of Las Vegas.
Hello.
And Dr. Abby Eblen from Nashville Fertility Center.
Hey, everybody. Susan's setting the bar higher. Now she's using 3 adjectives to describe us now.
I am not as gifted at alliteration as the two of you are.
See, up until now, we've used pretty standard complementary adjectives. Now we need to start going creative. Not that they'll be non-complementary, Complementary. Sorry, I'm having issues with words today. Holy cow. But we'll have to start getting more elaborate in these. I will have to consult the thesaurus.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I'm
half of the ones you already use, Carrie. I'm not sure if you're making up the words or combining different adjectives together.
Both of those things are entirely within my repertoire, so
you're being creative. I think that's a good thing, to be creative.
It is. It is. So we are currently in the springtime, and of course, the three of us do like to travel a decent amount. And
when we can.
When we can. So do we have any upcoming travel plans for the summer?
Well, my family's tagging on to a couple other families, and we're going to Scotland. And I've never been to Scotland before. And we're going to go to some castles. And one of the travelers is really into whiskey and scotch. So we're going to do some scotch tastings. And so I'm looking forward to that. It should be fun.
Are there any golf enthusiasts?
Yeah, my husband actually is trying to, he's debating the tough part about we're going to be in St. Andrews, but the tough part about that is, most real golfers want to use their own golf clubs. They don't want to rent golf clubs. So he's really it's really tough. Should he ship his golf clubs over for just one day, or should he rent golf clubs? So, but I think he's going to golf. I pushed him to it. I'm like, okay, this is your dream. We're over at St. Andrews. You've got to golf. So he's going to golf.
The only thing I know is apparently there are these ancient benches there, and only club members are allowed to sit on the benches.
Ooh, okay. Well,
that's like the one little piece of trivia that I've heard from a friend.
I'll make sure he doesn't get arrested sitting on one of the benches.
No sitting on the ancient benches.
Good to know. Good to know.
Can he wear a kilt while he's golfing? I mean, truly make it extra authentic and drafty.
Well, very interesting. My friends, I ate dinner with them last night, and they were talking about the things that say that you're an American when you're in Scotland. It's if men wear shorts, because men don't wear shorts there. I guess they wear kilts or they wear pants or something. They don't wear shorts. If you wear a baseball cap, and generally if you wear like a shirt that has some sort of printing on it, like like a
writing,
yeah, that pegs you as an American. That must be an American thing we do.
That and the white sneakers.
Are you doing something, Carrie, this summer?
Well, one of my partners is going to be gone for the majority of the summer. And so my summer is pretty truncated in when I can actually go anywhere. So we'll probably go to San Diego for a few days, because that is our default. You have a couple days, the weather's nice, you get to see the ocean. And
it's really nice to have that as a default. That's a pretty cool default.
It's a beautiful default. I mean, it's like a 4.5, 5-hour drive. And
nice.
If I can be near the water, really, I'm happy. I don't need very much else. And so that is our family's default. And that's probably what we'll do at least some point this summer, and go see, there's a lot of sea lions out there.
Yeah. They're cool.
Watch them hang out.
Yeah. So, and would you play, does anybody in your family play golf? Because there's some good golf courses there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, my husband's a big golfer, and he actually hasn't golfed too much in San Diego, because he may or may not get a ton of crap from his wife of, this is a family vacation. You will spend time with your family.
Because I think Torrey Pines is in San Diego, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's a gorgeous course. I think he actually has done that one. And he's done a bunch of the ones that are in California that are super famous are on his bucket list. So he's knocking a couple off of his golfing bucket list within the United States this year. So we'll probably have to start going internationally for some of those soon, which shucks, really sounds terrible. Yeah. What about you, Susan? Are you going anywhere?
So we're doing kind of 2 little family vacations. We're gonna drive to Florida with my brother-in-law and his family, and so we're gonna do that for about a week early in the summer, and then late in the summer one of my cousins turned 50 this last year. And so me and about 3 other family members decided to give him a cruise for his birthday present. And we thought it would be fun if we would go with him on said cruise.
Hey, that's a good gig. That's
so we're doing a little week-long cruise at the end of summer. So something at the beginning, something at the end, kind of at the bookends.
Nice. Oh, that'll be fun.
And I forgot to mention one thing since you said 2 trips. I happen to have a trip to this town somewhere out in the desert. It's really hot out there, and I think there's a casino or something out there. I think it's called Las Vegas. I'm heading out there this summer with some girlfriends. They kind of planned it. And
you're coming to Vegas this summer?
I am coming to Vegas in July. Yeah.
Ooh, why in July?
Well, I guess it's cheap. All the tolling. I know. But there's really nice pools though, right? So
there's a lot of pool parties. Are you going to do them?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. We're not that way. This won't be a wild girls weekend. I don't think it'll be, an older ladies, more refined trip, probably.
Subdued.
I'll start coming up with a list of things and places that you need to go.
Okay. You can come and show us the sights, Carrie.
I will totally do that because I'm going to be here all summer long. So
there you go.
Yeah. All right. Let's do our question of the day.
Okay.
So our question for today is, when is it time to give up on your own eggs? Background, 38 years old with DOR, AMH 0.4 and AFC of 6. Only have 1 fallopian tube. Husband is 43. Secondary infertility, had son naturally without an issue at 34. RE recommended IVF. They've done 5 egg retrievals. Round 1, 3 embryos, all abnormal. Round 2, 4 embryos, 2 normal, 2 abnormal. Round 3, no eggs made it to blast. Round 4, 1 embryo abnormal. Round 5, 4 embryos, all abnormal. 2 frozen IVF transfers. First ended in chemical and second ended in miscarriage at 9 weeks due to dip in HCG. Had DNC, then hysteroscopy showed uterus looked off. Got pregnant naturally, miscarried, had DNC, abnormal embryo. Fresh transfer of 2 embryos, abnormal. Should I move on to donor egg? Thanks.
I think as you say, Susan, it's a decision made with your head and with your heart. And, sometimes your heart tells you you're not done and you keep going. I think it's easy for any of us to look at this and go, well, the last time you had a normal embryo was with egg retrieval number 2. But I will also say that probably we all have that one patient, and I have that one patient this year who did 7 cycles, and on the 7th cycle, she has normal embryos. And so, we're kind of like you. We hate to give up, but I think a lot of times it has to do with what your heart's telling you. But I also think financially and emotionally, sometimes it just you can't keep going on emotionally. And I think if it's becoming sort of overwhelming for you and just kind of all consuming, hands down, you're gonna have a much better chance with a donated egg. So I think it's a decision you have to make. Nobody can really make it for you.
Carrie?
I would say step back, pull back and look and say, what is this doing to my life? Is this enhancing my life? Is this worsening my life? How am I doing with the child that I already have? How am I doing with my spouse, my friends, my work, my general sense of well-being in the world? And then go from there, because sometimes when you do that, it becomes crystal clear, okay, it's time to move on. And sometimes you're like, I'm okay. And checking in with the people closest to you will also be really helpful, because this is not an isolated journey. I mean, your kid and your partner are going through this with you, and there's the beauty and the goal of achieving a dream and a hard worked for goal, but means justify the ends doesn't necessarily apply to your life. And it's important to think about that, because, you do have this one kid that's still there. You do have a relationship that is, presumably healthy and ongoing, and you want to keep it that way. And so really pull back and ask your partner, sound out the people closest to you who give you answers that you trust, saying, what do you think? And you don't have to listen to them, but it's worthwhile to get their opinion, because they probably have some really valid insight that you may or may not have, because you were right smack in the middle of it more than anybody else, because you're the one who's having to poke yourself.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Y'all.
What do you think, Susan?
Y'all summarized it great. I mean, Abby used my own words, so you know
yeah,
what
exactly.
I have to say.
See, I have to give you credit if you're right here listening to me. So
it's awesome. It's awesome. Absolutely. Well, we are going to move on to our topic of the day. So our topic of the day, we've had a couple of people recently who have written in asking questions about things that they should think about if they are pursuing what I call long distance IVF. So you live in one place, you are going to have to travel a significant logistical amount. It's not just down the street or within your same, you know, metropolitan area type of thing. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, lots of people live in big cities, but lots of people, you know, throughout the world and throughout the United States don't necessarily live in those cities. I mean, I service two clinics that are, you know, 200 plus miles away from each other. So besides the fact I personally did long distance IVF, you know, I think it's a great topic that a lot of people are faced with either by choice or by necessity. So I think my first question for today for us to discuss are who are the people that we think about seeking long distance IVF?
Well, kind of you said it. I think people that don't have a doctor really close. We have some clinics in Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama that where people are. We don't have clinics there, and so people travel to see us. I think the beauty of telemedicine now, as opposed to kind of when you went through it, even. We can see those patients initially via telemedicine and talk to them initially. And then generally we'll do what we call a telemedicine follow-up visit where, you know, if they're interested, if they get financials and they say, yeah, I want to proceed on with this, then they'll come to our office. We'll do an exam. We'll do an ultrasound. A lot of times we'll even do the prerequisite labs that we need to have for IVF if they've made the decision that they want to do that. We try and really do everything we can to limit their travel to our clinic as much as they can until they start. We'll also measure the depth of the uterine cavity, make sure that we don't have a hard time getting in. And then if we can, if they're the right time in their cycle, we even try and do something like a saline sonogram, look at their tubes and look at their cavity and make sure there's not issues there. And then once we do that, then some clinics, and I'm sure it's different at different places, different in Texas and Las Vegas, but in some clinics have the capability to do outside monitoring where they can do ultrasounds, but more importantly for us, where they can do estrogen levels and get the results back the same day. There's only a few places that can do that. A lot of places can do ultrasounds, but if we can't get the estrogen levels, that makes it more challenging. So I'd be interested to hear how you guys do it.
Carrie, what do you do?
So a lot of our long distance people, I would say I always think of them in 3 different categories. So there's what I consider to be the local long distance. These are the people who live within either a 1 to 2 hour drive or a 1 to 2 hour plane ride, because unlike the rest of the country, like the East Coast, the Midwest, where it's like, oh, I'm going to drive, 2 hours and I'm going to be in the next place, or I'm going to drive an hour and I'm going to be in the next.
We could be in 7 different states in Tennessee if we drive for that long.
I wouldn't even cross a border. So,
so with us, there's kind of the local long distance people. They're the ones who live in Reno. They're the ones who live in Kingman and Bullhead City, in, across the state line in Baker, those places. Then I've got my domestic long distance. These are the people who live usually on the other side of the country in the Pacific Northwest. I've got a lot of Southerners. I've got a lot of Midwesterners. They're the people where it's a long plane ride. And then I've got my internationals. And so for most of the people who are the domestic long distance or the international long distance, they can't get here. And they can't get here until they absolutely have to get here. And so all of their stuff is done either by telemedicine or with their local docs. And if they're in a big city and there's an REI there who can help us out and do local monitoring, fabulous. If they're not, then we work with their OBGYNs and their primary care docs, and we do it that way. And a lot of it is knowing, okay, I really want intrauterine imaging, and typically I would order a saline ultrasound. You can't get that. Okay, you can probably get a hysteroscopy. I would normally do that without anesthesia because I can do that more cheaply and easily for my patients in my office. That's not going to work. So you're going to do it with anesthesia. And so we just kind of go back and forth and we say, okay, what can you get and how can I get the information that I need from your local doc. And I try and get as much as I can from pictures. I'm always asking people, can you please snap a picture with your cell phone and send it over? Because that way,
that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I don't get results quickly, or if I get a picture that looks like someone just sat on a photocopier and sent it, which color going to black and white,
that would be kind of an X-rated picture, Carrie.
I mean, haven't you guys ever sat on a copier before? Really?
I wouldn't say if I had, I wouldn't admit to it.
I mean, I never have, but Abby, I can see that you are the wild child who totally would.
Of course, yeah.
So some of the things I think about are, difference of when I did my IVF cycle 13 years ago. One, telemedicine has made a huge difference from us being able to do this. There's being able to have a visual. When I had my kind of telemedicine visit, it was on a phone call. Like literally, other than on the website, I had no idea what my doctor looked like. And so, being able to do more than just hear somebody's voice, I think being able to see somebody and be able to see their reactions in both ways when we're having the conversation of, you're needing fertility care. These are the things that we're going to do. Nice
to know they don't have like 3 heads and 5 arms and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Although as a physician, 5 arms would help me out here.
That would be really helpful, actually.
Yes.
Maybe an extra brain too. An auxiliary brain. That would be helpful too, actually.
Yeah.
I do. His name is Mark.
So the other thing that I think has made a big difference is our remote diagnostics have greatly improved. So, with the advent of not only things like modern fertility and other kind of over-the-counter methods for us to get FSH and estradiol, I use Reprosource. There's lots of kits that are available for ovarian reserve testing. Most of the kind of basic things like your CBC and your thyroid hormone and your hemoglobin A1C, you're going to be able to get that at your local blood draw center. Your doctor can just write the orders and we can fax it over and it'll be sent right over. And even when it comes to sperm testing, so 10 years ago, remote sperm testing was not a thing. Like we really didn't have the modalities to keep sperm alive and be able to tell motility and those types of things because the sperm would degrade. And now, regardless of the type of sperm testing you want, there's almost always a remote option. We even have a remote option even within our clinic of this little cup called a Protex cup that essentially the guy can collect, and that Protex cup with some media in it can protect the sperm for, I believe it's up to like 12 hours. So even my folks who may live down in the valley in Texas, if they needed to do, something they could, and the guy couldn't, or didn't want to do one of the mail order options or something like that, they can collect it home and drive it if they so desire, because people have different, some people don't want to mail their sperm.
I can understand that.
It's like if somebody does not feel like the United States Postal Service or FedEx can handle their sperm, we have options. I mean, that is the beauty of what we're doing nowadays, is we have so many options. Our world really has gotten smaller.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big thing. So can we talk a little bit about like when somebody's going through an IVF cycle and they're doing this remote monitoring, like what is this? What does this mean? So you as their physician, you're calling the shots, but then what's happening?
So in Nashville, kind of the way it works, and a lot of our patients are from about 2.5, 3 hours away. And we do have some physicians in Knoxville that can monitor for us. And we do have a few in Kentucky. But for some patients, it means they have to drive to our center for every blood draw and every ultrasound. For several patients, though, they're able to get those things done remotely. And so they'll message our nurse or get in touch with us and let us know what those results are. And then we have a voicemail set up for the patient, which we've always done, and basically tell them what their next step is, if they need to have another blood draw in 2 days, next day, whatever. and ultrasound. And then generally, most of our patients, unlike Carrie's patients, don't fly in, they drive in. And so usually most of our patients are within driving distances. So a lot of times, and of course, it depends on the time of the year and the weather and all that kind of stuff. A lot of patients will come in the night before their egg retrieval. Some patients, if there's any concern about, we don't quite know what's going on with the ultrasound or something doesn't make sense to us, sometimes we'll ask them to come to our office maybe for their last couple of ultrasounds. So maybe spend the night, a couple of nights in town, so that we can look at them and really kind of get a sense for what their eggs look like and if they're ready to be triggered or not. And then ultimately, once they're triggered, obviously for those procedures, for the retrieval and also for the embryo transfer, those will be trips that they'll have to make back to our office. But we try and really minimize the number of trips and really try and prevent them from having to drive a bunch back and forth to our office.
So Carrie, how do you navigate your remote monitoring?
So we typically rely on really whomever we can get to do the remote monitoring, because for most of us, for most of our patients, they're not the local long distance. Most of them are coming from a much further distance that makes it a little bit more challenging, because the ones who are local, like, they'll figure out how to do the hour and a half drive to come in, and they'll do it and they'll be done. For our long distance folks, what we'll do is they will go to whatever facility they can get to. And I prefer REI because that means that I can get the labs turned over quickly. But if I can't have that, then I can't have that. And as part of the reason
Carrie, if you get a lab, like say you can't get a same day lab, then do you just delay? Like, how do you're sort of like a day and a half off or something, or I guess a half day off or something?
I do a couple of things in that situation. So one, I may have them draw labs the evening before and do the ultrasound in the morning, because most of the times you can get like an estradiol the next morning. Now, post-trigger labs is a whole different issue. But when it comes to estradiols, we can sometimes do that. And honestly, I find that most of my decisions are made on
the end,
follicles before.
Based on the ultrasound.
I make my decisions and then I get my labs in and then I'm like, yep, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that.
Yeah.
But there's those few that may plateau or drop or something that would change your decision. But with estrogen levels, that is.
So for the most part, by the time someone hits day 10 or 11 of stim, I make them come to Las Vegas, because at that point, there's a couple things to consider. Number one, we're in trigger territory, and I don't really care what your follicles have looked like up until this point. I mean, I do, but it's not as critical.
Right.
And when we are at the point of trigger, I want it done in my lab, in my center, with my ultrasonographers, with me able to immediately pull up those pictures and see what they mean, or just walk into the room if I need to. And so we typically have people come out about day 10, because that's pretty close to the time of trigger. And so that way we get those last couple of ultrasounds and we're getting turnaround times really quickly. So that's what we do the majority of the time. But otherwise, I'll go off the ultrasound, I'll make the decision, and then say, always subject to change based on what your labs come back as. The other reason that we have people come out at that point is because, God forbid, you have a storm, or in this day and age, a canceled flight, and you can't get from podunk small town somewhere to Las Vegas. I don't want you releasing your eggs on your own. I don't want you going a lot further than we want you to be going. And so that's the other part of the reason that we make people come in at that point, is because at day 10, you can always push another day or two, almost all the time. But if someone misses a flight, or if something gets canceled, or there's a big, bad, and ugly storm, you are SOL. And that, depending on the patient, that can be really dangerous for hyperstimulation. Just don't want to do that. And so that's why we make them come out with the timing that we do. And that tends to hold true whether they're coming from within the United States or from outside of the United States. As long as we can get them meds where they are, which most of the time we can do, then they start elsewhere and they land with us about day 10.
So Susan, what was your experience on the other side of things? Carrie and I have both been on one side, but you've been on both sides of this. So tell me about your experience traveling.
Right. So, the way that we did it was we did local monitoring, early on and around, around day 10, it was whatever, it was really at what a certain follicle size. They were like, you need to come on up and you're going to be with us at this point on, which I think that's kind of how I do it. It depends on follicle size and age of the patients. You know, we all know that those ladies who are in their 40s tend to sometimes go from 16 to 24, quick. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
And so there is a little, you know, kind of grace in there. So I did that and then flew across the country and then did monitoring. I do, when you do go from wherever you are locally to wherever you're going to, like, be aware that it may be different. You know, the place where I was doing my local stuff, it was, you know, a smaller clinic. We were in, we were out, you know, I got my blood draw at the, you know, local place there. The place I did my IVF was more of a ginormous institution. And, it was much more of a cattle call. You know, everybody could get the doors opened at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., one or the other. I've kind of blocked out a lot of that. And everybody got their blood drawn, and then you essentially got back in line for your ultrasound, and it was first come, first serve. And, so you went and did your ultrasound, and then you got a phone call sometime between like 5 and 9 p.m. about your instructions. And, so I would advise when you're transitioning to kind of ask your nurse that you've been working with, what will I expect when I get there? Because doing IVF long distance is definitely, in my opinion, more stressful than doing it locally. Okay.
You're just trying to find directions and how to get there and how to get to the clinic and where they are. I mean, I think that'd be really
adding in layers of
parking,
of things that can happen. And I mean, I'm absolutely glad I did it. You know, I have a beautiful daughter because of it. But it definitely adds in layers of complication that if you don't have to, because you either live close to somebody, we absolutely want you to go with who you're comfortable with. That is the most important qualification of choosing your REI. And if that means traveling across the country, then that's okay. But I think knowing to ask wherever you're going, what am I to expect when I get there, is good, because you tend to visualize and kind of be like, oh, this is what I've been doing. I've gotten comfortable. I've been doing this for a week and a half. And then I'm going into a new situation. And if it's very different than what you've done,
like you have to get up at 5 a.m. and stand in line.
It's not that it's wrong. It's that it's different. And I think we all prepare ourselves for difference better if we like can start being like, okay, this is what I've been doing. This is what I'm going to do. It's okay. It's just, it's going to be a different part of the process. And then I did my egg retrieval, and did my egg retrieval, and we were planning on flying out that night, which I wouldn't recommend flying across the country the night of egg retrieval.
No.
I remember laying in the back of a taxi.
And why did you do that exactly? Why did you?
Well, I did it because at the place that I worked at the time, I had no maternity leave and I had 10 days of vacation. And so every day I was gone doing my IVF was taking away a little bit of the very small time off that I was going to get paid when I actually did get pregnant. So I would not do that again. Like because I literally remember like being in the back of a taxi curled up on my husband's lap, cramping. And I only got like 7 eggs. So it's not like I was like big hyperstemmed or anything like that, but it was uncomfortable. And then we got to the airport and there ended up being a snowstorm. We got stuck there for like 3 more days.
Oh no.
Yeah. Got stuck there and then finally flew back. And I was doing, we were doing PGT, but we were doing PGT with a fresh embryo transfer because this was before the data came out that like frozen embryo transfers might be that good idea. So literally went back, worked for like 3 days, and then flew back with the hope that I was going to have a chromosomally normal embryo.
Oh yeah.
To place back.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a lot. It was a lot. So number one, do a frozen embryo transfer. Don't do that fresh embryo transfer.
And that's because you have more flexibility, right? Because once the embryo is frozen, you can do the transfer whenever.
Yeah. The flexibility of that is worth all of the decreased stress level points.
Yeah.
That was the insane part. And then after embryo transfer, it was, I don't think a lot of it was any different. I just got my, it was actually kind of funny because I got my blood drawn and called my clinic to tell them I was pregnant.
That's funny. That's funny.
So that was a little role reversal. They were like, this is a little odd.
Well, let me just interject as a physician. I don't think I would have advised you to fly across the country. Number one, I know why you had to do it, but for a lot of patients too, just in general, for any patient, I'm amazed at the number of people. And I ask them when I do an egg retrieval, I'm like, I would not recommend that you go to work tomorrow. They're like, really? And I'm like, no. I mean, I've had an egg retrieval and it hurts. I mean, you're bloated and distended. It's uncomfortable. Yeah. I would say it's like putting your size 8 foot in a size 5 shoe and walking around in it all day. That's kind of what your ovaries feel like. They're jammed in your abdomen and they're moving around and they're irritated. So, so I understand why you did it, Susan, but if I'd been your doctor, I would not have advised you to fly away from me at least for 24 hours. Because, I would say patients don't realize that what we do is a surgery and the same risk apply: bleeding, infection, pain, that kind of stuff. And, if you'd had a complication, I'm not preaching to you, but just in general, if somebody has a complication, ideally you want to be close to your doctor. Now, Susan was a physician, so she could have figured it out herself, but most people, that would be hard to do.
I would tend to advise that physicians make some of the worst patients.
And I would agree with that because we think we're infallible.
we think we're invincible. And I mean, for like the good and bad of it, like literally I was thinking about everybody else I needed to take care of. And I wasn't thinking about taking care of me. I was the least. I was concerned about my embryo. Okay. Again, not concerned about me. I was concerned about my embryo and I was concerned about my patients and taking care of everything back home. That and yes, for our listeners, take care of yourself because that is the most important, because if you do have a partner, as much as they want that baby, they want you more. And so again, we talked about this earlier, that taking a step back when you're doing something that kind of feels like this is a little crazy, that taking a step back and being like, is this a good idea? Because, you do have a lot. I would say if you're doing remote IVF, you probably have more of an opportunity to do something that may not be a wise decision.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I just think women in general too. Women in general put everybody else first except for themselves. I mean, we all do that. And I think when you're in this situation, and I think a lot of it is you don't want people to know. And so you want to get back to normal activity as quick as you can. But like Susan said, take care of yourself. I mean, that's the most important thing of all, is to make sure you're healthy and that you take care of yourself. And take a day off from work. It's okay.
All right. So any other words of advice for people who are planning on traveling and doing their IVF? Carrie.
Get the plane tickets that are easily changed.
Yes. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Like I routinely tell this to people of whatever you need to do such that if you need to change a ticket at the last minute, you can, because
that's great.
If your eggs are growing faster, if your lining is moving faster, if everything is going slower, you want the ability to change that. You want the ability to get there and realize, oh, I don't feel great after a retrieval, or conversely, I feel amazeballs and I want to go home. Like, you want the ability to switch that up at the last minute. And so I would highly recommend getting the flight that is the most flexible for what you were doing.
That's a great idea.
Yes, absolutely. And I would advise, widening your circle of people that you are sharing your journey with.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially if you're traveling, because you're going to need more support, whether it's at home or it's at work. And, as much as this is a very private and personal thing, if you're doing this long distance, you're going to need a little bit more than the average person. And it's okay. And give yourself permission to ask for some help, because I mean, it takes a village to make a baby. Okay. Not just to raise a baby, but it takes a village to make a baby. And, sometimes when I flew back from my embryo transfer, my mom came with me because my husband needed to go back to work because we got stuck in that snowstorm. It's just widen your circle of people that you're sharing with, because you are going to need probably more help than somebody who's maybe doing this locally.
Well, and I'd make the argument too that even emotionally, I think for anybody going through IVF, widen your circle, because, I think a lot of us, and I was the same way, you kind of want to keep it under wraps, but, especially if something doesn't go well, you want to be able to have some people to lean on emotionally. I mean, you really want to be able to share with other people. And so I think whether you're traveling or not, it's good to widen your circle and let a few people in on what's going on.
Yeah. The other practical point is when you're taking all of these medications on the airplane, number one, keep them with you. Do not put them in a care. Put them in luggage that's going to get packed under the plane.
Right.
Make sure that they are with you. Bring, when you can, the original boxes, so you have the prescription, and bring a note from your doc. Now, with all of that, I have never had somebody who's gotten stopped and had to throw medication away or anything like that.
Me neither. Yeah, I've never had anybody. A few people will ask for me to write something, but I've had a lot of people that travel, and I don't think in general, if you have medicine, they make you have a doctor's note or anything.
Yeah, I haven't ever had anyone with issues from it, but it's a nice thing to have.
It makes you feel good that you're like, even if they stop me in security and do a random check and they find needles, that they're going to be like, oh, here's my little note, and we just move on.
Yes, I'm not running a cartel. Really, this is and a lot of times, if you need to get more medication, you can usually do it when you are at your clinic, because they're going to know in town where they can send you for quick stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think I'm done now.
Awesome. Right. This was great.
Yeah.
So to our audience, thank you so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for more. Also, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. We are also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so make sure you follow us and subscribe and stay updated with all things infertility.
You can also visit fertilitydocsuncensored.com to submit specific questions you have about infertility. All questions will be answered on the Ask the Doc segment anonymously, so don't hold back. We want to know. We also love episode ideas, so let us know what you're thinking and what you want to hear.
And as always, this podcast is intended for entertainment. It's not a substitute for medical advice from your own physician. So enjoyed talking to you guys today. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.